My daughter knelt on the marble floor, her face drenched in tears, scrubbing frantically while her mother-in-law screamed, "Faster, you useless creature." I pulled out my phone and did something that would change everything forever. What happened next left that wealthy family bankrupt and destroyed. Where are you watching from today? Leave your location in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. But let me tell you how I reached that moment. It began 3 years earlier. The plane touched down at JFK Airport in New York at 7:43 in the morning. 3 years. It had been 3 long years since I'd last embraced my daughter, Sarah. 3 years since she'd married Daniel Sterling in that intimate ceremony in Cleveland, where he'd promised to treat her like a queen. 3 years of video calls that grew increasingly sporadic, where she always looked exhausted but insisted everything was perfect. My name is Linda Davis. I'm 54 years old, and if I've learned anything in this life, it's that when a woman says everything is perfect in that hollow, lifeless voice, she's usually lying. But I, like any hopeful mother, wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe that my only daughter had found happiness with that tall, handsome man who spoke with such confidence and came from an important family in the Hamptons. The taxi wound through the city streets while I tried to calm my racing heart. I'd saved for 2 years for this trip, working double shifts at the hospital where I work as a nurse. Sarah didn't know I was coming. I wanted to surprise her. During our last video call 3 weeks ago, I'd noticed something disturbing. She had a bruise on her arm that she claimed came from a cooking accident. But her eyes, God, her eyes, they held that empty, haunted look I'd seen too many times in the emergency room. The look of someone who's surviving, not living. "Ma'am, we've arrived," the taxi driver said, pulling me from my thoughts. The Sterling estate was breathtaking. 3 stories of weathered stone, enormous windows, and gardens that looked like they belonged in a magazine spread. This was the home of the important family Daniel had boasted about. He'd sent me the address months ago, back when he still bothered answering my messages. I rang the doorbell once, twice. On the 3rd ring, I heard voices inside, shouting. An older woman's voice, sharp and cruel, yelling something. And then Sarah's voice, weak and frightened, apologizing for something. The door opened. A woman of about 75 stood before me. Her silver hair perfectly styled, a pearl necklace adorning her throat that probably cost more than my house. She looked me up and down with the kind of contempt that only people with old money know how to perfect. "Yes." Her voice could have frozen water. "I'm Linda, Sarah's mother. I've come to visit her." The woman's expression flickered for just a moment. I saw something like panic flash across her face. "Sarah isn't here. She's traveling." Liar. I just heard my daughter's voice inside. "I see. When does she return?" "I can wait." "That's not possible. The family is occupied today." I was about to insist when I heard a crash from somewhere inside the house. Something had fallen, or someone had dropped something, and then the unmistakable sound of someone crying, trying to muffle their sobs. "Excuse me," I said firmly, before the old witch could react. I took advantage of her turning toward the noise and slipped through the gap in the doorway, pushing past her into the house. "Margaret," she shouted after me, but I was already inside, following the sound of distress. What I saw shattered my soul into pieces. Sarah was on her knees on the dining room floor, picking up shards of a broken teacup with trembling hands. Her hair was greasy and pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore a stained, threadbare t-shirt and old pajama pants. But what truly destroyed me was her face, pale gaunt, with deep purple circles under her eyes and an expression of absolute terror when she looked up and saw me. "Mom!" Her voice was barely a whisper, as if she couldn't believe I was real. "Sarah, what the hell is happening here?" The mother-in-law. Because obviously this was Margaret Sterling, the matriarch of this nightmare family, planted herself between us like a wall. "This is my house. You need to leave immediately. I'm not going anywhere until I speak to my daughter." "Mom!" Sarah's voice cracked. "Linda?" Daniel appeared at the top of the stairs, impeccably dressed in a 3-piece suit, the same man who'd sworn to love and cherish my daughter. What a surprise. "Surprise?" I repeated, feeling fury beginning to boil in my veins. Yes, I imagine it is. Would someone like to explain to me why my daughter is scrubbing floors on her hands and knees like Cinderella? It's a misunderstanding, Daniel said with that rehearsed smile he probably used to close business deals. Sarah was just helping. Helping. I interrupted him sharply. What a convenient word. And I suppose the bruises on her arms are also from helping? The silence that followed was so thick and heavy it felt like it could be cut with a knife. Sarah stood up slowly, her whole body shaking. Mom, please don't make a scene. Everything is fine. Everything is fine? I stare at my daughter, this strange, pale, terrified version of the brilliant woman I'd raised. Something inside me broke, but not from sadness, from rage. A cold, calculating rage that settled into my bones. Sarah, go pack your things. We're leaving. Now. You cannot do this. Margaret's voice rose to a shriek. She's married to my son. She's part of this family. Family? I spat the word like poison. This isn't a family. This is a goddamn slave house with a fancy facade. Daniel approached, and for the first time, I saw his mask slip. His eyes turned hard, threatening. Linda, I think you're tired from your journey. You don't understand how things work here. Wives have responsibilities. Responsibilities? I pulled out my phone and held it up like this responsibility. I showed him the photo I'd just taken. Sarah on her knees, surrounded by broken glass, with his mother standing over her like a prison guard. His expression changed instantly. Delete that. Now. Or what? Are you gonna make me scrub floors too? Margaret let out a bitter, harsh laugh. Typical low-class behavior. Always so dramatic. Sarah is happy here. She has everything she needs. A beautiful home, fine clothes. Fine clothes? I interrupted her, gesturing at the rags my daughter was wearing. Where exactly are these fine clothes? Because what I see is a broken woman living in a gilded prison. Enough. Daniel's voice dripped with venom. You leave my house immediately or I'm calling the police. I smiled. It was a slow, dangerous smile. Please call them. I would absolutely love to explain to the authorities why my daughter is living in conditions of domestic abuse. I'm sure the sheriff would be fascinated to hear about it. I saw Daniel's confidence waver. Margaret hissed something at him quickly. Furiously, he responded in the same low, urgent tone. They were arguing but maintaining their smiles for my benefit. What a theatrical family. Sarah, I said without taking my eyes off Daniel, I'm going to ask you only once. Do you want to leave this place? My daughter looked at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. I saw the exact moment when something inside her broke apart and then reassembled itself, stronger than before. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Mom. Please, get me out of here. Perfect. I walked toward her and took her hand. Go pack the essentials. 5 minutes. She's not going anywhere. Margaret moved to block our path. Everything she has belongs to this family. The dresses, the jewelry, everything was purchased with sterling money. I looked the old harpy directly in her cold eyes. Perfect. Keep your blood-stained rags. My daughter doesn't need anything from this cursed house. Sarah ran toward the stairs. Daniel tried to follow her, but I planted myself directly in front of him. Don't even think about it. You're interfering in matters you don't understand. You know nothing about our marriage. I know enough. I know my daughter called me 6 months ago crying because your mother forced her to clean the toilets with a toothbrush. I know that 4 months ago she stopped wearing makeup on our video calls because she had to hide bruises. And I know, I stepped closer to him, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper, that if you ever lay a hand on her again, it won't be the police who find you. It'll be the morgue. Daniel went pale. Are you threatening me? No, sweetheart. I'm making you a promise. Sarah rushed back down the stairs with a small backpack. She'd changed into jeans and a sweatshirt. Clothes she'd probably hidden away because they were too ordinary for Sterling. Ready, she said, and her voice carried a strength I hadn't heard in years. Margaret blocked the front door. If you walk out that door, you're dead to this family. Dead to Daniel. You won't see a cent of sterling money." Sarah looked at her mother-in-law, and to my surprise and pride, she smiled. "Perfect. I'd rather be poor than be your slave for one more day." We left that nightmare house while Daniel shouted threats and Margaret called God knows who on her phone. I didn't care. I had rescued my daughter from a hell wrapped in silk curtains. In the taxi back to the hotel, Sarah cried on my shoulder for 20 solid minutes. When she could finally speak, what she told me made me want to go back and burn that house to the ground. But I had something better planned. Because Linda Davis didn't take revenge with fire. She took revenge with information. And I had photographed far more of that house than Daniel could possibly imagine. The hotel where I was staying was modest, a small room downtown, far from the obscene elegance of the Sterling estate. Sarah showered for 40 minutes. When she emerged with clean, wet hair, wrapped in a white hotel robe, she looked 10 years younger. "Tell me everything," I said, sitting on the bed beside her. "And don't tell me it's fine, because it clearly isn't." Sarah stared at her hands. Her nails were bitten down to the quick. My daughter, who had always been so particular about her perfectly manicured nails. "It was gradual," she began, her voice trembling. "At first, everything was perfect. Daniel was attentive, romantic. He took me to fancy restaurants, bought me designer clothes. But 1 week after the wedding, when we arrived in New York, everything changed." "How?" "Margaret." Sarah spat the name as if it were poison. "She controls everything in that house. Everything. Daniel does nothing without her permission. And from day one, she made it crystal clear that I was inferior, from Cleveland poor, without proper breeding." Sarah made air quotes with her fingers. According to her, Daniel had lowered himself by marrying me. I was a whim, a mistake that needed to be corrected. I felt rage bubbling up again, but I kept it controlled. "And Daniel allowed this? Daniel is a coward." The words came out loaded with bitterness. "He's a 38-year-old child who has never said no to his mother. When Margaret started assigning me household chores to teach me to be a proper wife, he just shrugged and said it was temporary." "What kind of chores?" Sarah took a shaky breath. "Cleaning, cooking, washing clothes by hand because, according to Margaret, machines don't clean thoroughly enough. Waking up at 5 in the morning to prepare breakfast, serving the meals while they ate in the dining room, and I stood waiting for them to finish, so I could eat their leftovers. Sarah," my voice broke, "that's not even the worst of it, Mom." She wiped away tears. "Margaret has 2 daughters, Ashley and Jessica. They live with their husbands in apartments Margaret bought for them, but they come to the estate every single day and treat me like their personal servant." "What?" "Ashley makes me wash her laundry. Jessica makes me babysit her children, without paying me a dime. Once, Jessica deliberately spilled red wine on an antique Persian rug, and then told Margaret I had done it. They made me clean it with a toothbrush for 7 hours straight. 7 hours, Mom." I closed my eyes, trying to control the impulse to go back to that house and do something I'd probably regret later. "Oh, God, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ask for help?" "Because I was ashamed." Sarah sobbed harder. "You worked so hard to give me a good life. You paid for my college education. You supported me in everything. And I threw it all away to marry a man who turned out to be a complete fraud. I didn't want to admit I'd screwed up so spectacularly. Honey, listen to me." I took her face gently in my hands. "None of this is your fault. Nothing. That family are monsters dressed in expensive clothes, and money doesn't erase monstrosity. It just puts it in a bigger house." Sarah laughed through her tears. "You always have a phrase for everything. 54 years of experience." I smiled. "Now tell me what else happened." 6 months ago, Daniel lost his job. That surprised me. "What?" But he always talked about his successful career in finance. Lies. All lies. Sarah wiped her eyes. "He worked for a company that belonged to one of Margaret's friends. She got him the position. But Daniel is incompetent. He showed up late constantly. He didn't meet his responsibilities. He blamed others for his mistakes. Finally, they fired him. And what did he do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Margaret pays him an allowance from her own money like he's a teenager. He spends his days playing golf with his equally useless friends and his nights drinking expensive wine in the study. So that whole story about his important position was a lie? His entire life is a lie, Mom. The house isn't Daniel's. It's Margaret's. The money is Margaret's. Even the car he drives belongs to Margaret. Daniel is a 38-year-old dependent who compensates for his failure by abusing his wife. Did he hit you? I asked, though I already knew the answer in my heart. Sarah nodded slowly. The first time was 4 months ago. I had cooked pasta for dinner, but I overcooked it slightly. It wasn't burned, just a bit too soft. Margaret made a huge scene about it. Daniel waited until everyone went to sleep, and then he came to the kitchen where I was cleaning. He grabbed me by the arm and slapped me across the face. He told me I was embarrassing him in front of his family. I felt physically ill. Then it became more frequent. Once a week, then twice, then every time something bothered him. Anything at all, but never on the face. Always where clothes could cover the marks. It's calculated, Mom. He knows exactly what he's doing. Damn him. I muttered. Margaret knows. Everyone knows. Ashley once told me I should learn not to provoke him, as if it were my fault her brother is a violent coward. Sarah, did you file a police report? With whom? The Sterlings have connections everywhere. Margaret plays bridge with the sheriff's wife. Daniel went to school with half the police department. I tried to talk to a neighbor once, and the next day Margaret visited her house. I don't know what she said, but that woman never spoke to me again. I stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out before us, beautiful and utterly indifferent. We're going to destroy them, I said finally. What? I turned to face her. The Sterlings. We're going to destroy them, legally, financially, and socially. Mom, we can't. They have too much power. They have money, which isn't the same as real power. And I have something better, proof. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken. Sarah cleaning, the bruises on her arms, the look of abject terror on her face. But I also photographed something else. I smiled. The house itself, the paintings on the walls, and most importantly, the documents I saw on Daniel's desk when I walked through. What documents? Sarah asked, leaning forward. Invoices, bank statements, letters from lawyers. My smile widened. Your dear husband left his mail very conveniently in plain sight, and I, being the busybody I am, photographed everything. Sarah looked at me with a mixture of horror and admiration. Mom, that's illegal. Probably, I shrugged. But they're never going to admit they left their private documentation within reach of an unwanted visitor, because that would mean admitting I'm smarter than them. And people like the Sterlings would rather die than admit that. What did you see in those documents? I sat beside her again, my voice dropping. Debts. Mountains of debt. Turns out the fabulous Sterling family isn't so fabulous after all. Margaret has been using her own money to keep up appearances, but that money is running out fast. What? The estate has a mortgage they're about to default on. Daniel owes money to 3 different casinos. Ashley and her husband are being sued for unpaid taxes. And Jessica, I laughed. Jessica is having an affair with her husband's personal trainer, and someone is blackmailing them with photographs. Sarah's jaw dropped. How do you know all this? Because unlike the Sterlings, I actually know how to read, and they're arrogant enough to leave evidence of their problems lying around on desks, assuming no one who's inferior would understand what they were looking at. So what do we do? I smiled. First, you're going to sleep. Tomorrow, we're going to talk to a very specific lawyer I know in the city. And then, my smile widened, we're going to watch how fast an empire built on lies and borrowed money collapses. Sarah hugged me tightly. I love you, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you. Fortunately, you'll never have to find out. That night, while Sarah slept, I stayed awake planning. The Sterlings thought I was just an ignorant woman from Ohio, easy to intimidate and dismiss. They were about to discover that Linda Davis was neither ignorant nor easily intimidated, and that messing with my daughter had been the biggest mistake of their pathetic, privileged lives. The office of attorney Matthew Richardson was located on a narrow street, in the business district. It wasn't the kind of fancy office the Sterlings would frequent. It was small, with worn furniture, and the smell of strong coffee permeating everything. But Matthew had something the fancy downtown offices didn't have: a deep, burning hatred for wealthy families who abuse their power. "Tell me everything," said Matthew, a man of about 60 with gray hair and piercing blue eyes. I'd found his name on an online forum. A woman had written, "If you need legal help against cruel, rich people, Matthew Richardson is your man. He cannot be bought." I told him everything. Sarah added details that broke my heart all over again. How Margaret rationed her food, telling her she was getting fat and that no Sterling could be fat. How Daniel checked her phone every night and had forbidden her from contacting her friends back in Cleveland. How Daniel's sisters called her the hillbilly when Margaret wasn't within earshot. Matthew listened to everything without interrupting. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and clasped his hands together thoughtfully. "I know the Sterlings," he said finally. My heart sank. "You do?" "Yes. I represented their housekeeper 10 years ago, Maria, a woman from Mexico. They accused her of stealing jewelry. It was a complete fabrication. Margaret had actually lost the jewelry gambling and needed a scapegoat. I won the case, but Maria had to leave the state. The Sterling family made absolutely certain no one in New York would hire her again. So, you know exactly what we're dealing with," I said. "Yes, and I also know how to defeat them." He smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. "The Sterlings have a secret, a big secret they've kept buried for years, and I know what it is." Sarah and I leaned forward simultaneously. "What secret?" Matthew opened a drawer and pulled out an old, thick folder. 30 years ago, Margaret's husband, John Sterling, was a simple office worker. They lived in a modest apartment. Then John died suddenly. Heart attack. 1 month later, Margaret appears with a fortune. She claimed John had secret investments that no one knew about, smart business dealings he'd kept private. "But it wasn't true," I said, seeing where this was going. "No. The truth is that Margaret had been having an affair with Samuel Cole, a married and extremely wealthy man. When John died, Samuel gave Margaret a substantial sum of money to keep her quiet about their relationship. He had a sick wife and a pristine reputation to protect. Margaret took that money and built the entire legend of John's successful businesses." "How do you know this?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "Because Samuel Cole was my uncle. On his deathbed, he told me everything. He gave me documents, bank transfers, love letters, photographs. He made me promise that if Margaret ever hurt anyone else with the power that money gave her, I would use that information to stop her." I felt a smile growing on my face. "And we are that someone else." "Exactly. But there's more." Matthew pulled out another document. "I've been investigating Daniel since you called yesterday. Turns out he doesn't only owe money to casinos. He's also been falsifying invoices in his mother's company's name." "What company?" Sarah asked. "Margaret has a small textile import company. It's not very profitable, but it gives her social prestige and tax benefits. Daniel has been creating fake invoices, charging the company for services that were never provided, and pocketing the money. We're talking about $200,000 over the last 2 years. Does Margaret know?" I asked. "No. She's too proud to check the accounting books herself. She trusts Daniel to handle the company finances, which," Matthew smiled grimly, "is her second biggest mistake. The first was messing with your daughter. So what's the plan?" I asked eagerly. Matthew spread several documents across his desk. "First, we file for divorce on Sarah's behalf. We cite physical and emotional abuse, involuntary servitude, and marital fraud." "Marital fraud?" "Daniel lied to Sarah about his entire financial situation. He made her believe he was successful and independent. That constitutes fraud, especially if the deception induced a marriage." "Perfect," Sarah said, her voice stronger than before. "What else?" "Second, we file a criminal complaint against Daniel for domestic violence. We have the photographs, Sarah's testimony, and..." He pulled out his phone. "I have a doctor friend who will examine Sarah and document all injuries, old and new, for the court record. Will that be enough? I asked. You said the Sterlings have contacts everywhere. They have contacts in the local police department. Yes, but my friend is a forensic medical examiner. She works directly with the district attorney's office, and the district attorney is not as easy to buy as a local sheriff. And the third step? Sarah looked at the documents with a mixture of fear and hope. The third step is the sweetest. Matthew's smile turned predatory. We expose everything publicly. Daniel's fraud, the true origin of Margaret's money, the hidden debts and affairs. We publish it all in the newspapers. The Sterlings live and breathe on their reputation. Without it, they're nothing. But that won't necessarily send them to jail, I pointed out. No, Matthew admitted, but it will destroy them socially. And for people like the Sterlings, that's actually worse than jail. No one will want to do business with them. No one will invite them to charity galas and country club events. Their so-called friends will disappear like smoke. And without those social contacts and connections, they won't be able to protect their precious Daniel from the domestic violence charges. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. It was exactly what we needed. How long will this take? I asked. 1 month to prepare everything properly. 2 months to get to trial. But Matthew raised a finger. We can start applying pressure immediately. As soon as we file the documents, Daniel and Margaret will come crawling to negotiate. I don't want to negotiate, Sarah said with a firm voice I hadn't heard in years. I want them to pay for what they did to me. Matthew looked at her with visible approval. Good, because I don't want to negotiate either. I want to watch them destroyed. We left Matthew's office with a solid plan and a folder full of documents to sign. Sarah was more animated than I'd seen her in 3 years. Do you really think this will work? She asked as we walked through the city streets. I know it will work because people like the Sterlings have one fundamental flaw. They think they're untouchable, and that arrogance makes them careless. Like leaving documents on the desk. Sarah smiled slightly. Exactly. I returned her smile. Daniel thought I was too stupid to understand what I was seeing. Margaret thought I was too scared to do anything about it. Both were catastrophically wrong. That afternoon, I took Sarah to see the doctor Matthew had recommended. Dr. Helen Ross was a serious woman of about 50 who examined my daughter with professional but deeply humane care. You have old fractures in 2 ribs, Helen said while reviewing the x-rays, her voice clinical but tinged with anger, probably from 3 or 4 months ago. You also have scars on your back consistent with repeated blows from a flat object. She looked up. A belt. Sarah nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. And these bruises on your arms are recent, from within the last week, I'd estimate. Helen took photographs of everything with methodical precision. Sarah, I need you to understand something. What has happened to you is extremely serious. This isn't just a bad marriage or difficult relationship. This is systematic abuse and torture. I know, Sarah whispered. Good, because I'm going to document everything thoroughly, and I'm going to testify in your case. And I promise you that man is going to pay for what he's done. When we left the medical office, Sarah cried, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of relief. Finally, she said between sobs, someone believes me. All these months, I thought I was going crazy. That maybe I really was a problem. You were never the problem. Honey, never. That night, my phone rang. It was a local number I didn't recognize. Yes. Linda. Daniel's voice was tense, strained. We need to talk. We have absolutely nothing to talk about. I know you went to see a lawyer. That surprised me. Are you following me? It's a small world. I have friends everywhere. Friends. I repeated. What a generous word for people who owe you favors because you launder money through them. Silence. Then, you don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know about the fake invoices. I know about the casino debts. I know your precious perfect life is a lie built on fraud and stolen money. Be careful, Linda. You're playing a very dangerous game. No, Daniel, you've been playing a dangerous game. I'm just finishing it. My mother can make your life very difficult. Your mother? I actually laughed. You mean the woman who built her fortune by being the mistress of a married man? That mother? Another silence. Longer this time. How? Like I said, I know a lot of things. And very soon, everyone else is going to know those same things. This is extortion. No, sweetheart, this is justice. Extortion is what you did to Sarah, forcing her to work like a slave under threat of violence. I'm just making sure the world knows exactly who you really are. What do you want? His voice had lost all its bravado. I don't want anything from you. 3 days ago, maybe I would have accepted money to keep quiet. But now I've seen what you did to my daughter with my own eyes. Now I know you're an abusive coward who hits women smaller than him to feel like a man. So I don't want your dirty money. I want to watch you fall. Linda, I hung up. My hands were shaking, but from adrenaline, not fear. Sarah was staring at me with wide eyes. Was that him? Yes. What did he say? Empty threats. Panic disguised as masculine bravado. I smiled. Daniel finally understands he's in real trouble. Do you think he'll try to do something to us? Probably he'll try something. I held up my phone, but I recorded the entire conversation, including the part where he basically admitted to the fake invoices. Sarah laughed, a real, genuine laugh that I hadn't heard from her in years. Mom, you're practically a criminal mastermind. No, honey, I'm a mother protecting her daughter. The criminals are them. And as the city lights glittered outside our hotel window, I knew the Sterlings had finally encountered someone who wouldn't be intimidated by their money, their connections, or their threats. They had found Linda Davis, and that had been their fatal mistake. At 7 the next morning, Matthew called with news. The documents have been filed. Officially, Sarah is suing for divorce, and there's a temporary restraining order against Daniel. How long until they find out? I asked. They probably already know. Daniel's lawyers will have been notified this morning. We didn't have to wait long. At 9:30 a.m., while Sarah and I were having breakfast at a cafe near the hotel, my phone exploded with calls. Daniel, Margaret, unknown numbers, all desperately trying to contact me. I ignored every single call. At 10:15, a text message arrived from Daniel. We need to talk in person. I will compensate you for any trouble. Please. I deleted the message without responding. At 11 o'clock, Margaret called. This time, I answered. I put the phone on speaker so Sarah could hear. Who do you think you are? Margaret's voice trembled with pure rage. How dare you attack my family? Good morning, Margaret. Did you sleep well? Listen to me, you insignificant nobody. Ah, there it is. The classism coming right to the surface. Please continue. I'm recording this call. Silence. What do you want? Her voice was now more controlled, calculating. I already told your son. I don't want anything. Everyone wants something. Money. A house. I can give you $50,000. Sarah withdraws the lawsuit, and we never speak of this again. $50,000, I repeated slowly. For 3 years of torture? For beatings? For humiliation? For servitude? Is that what my daughter's suffering is worth to you? 100,000. That's my final offer. No. What do you want then? I want Daniel arrested. I want your reputation destroyed. I want everyone to know what kind of monsters you really are. You're a vengeful, crazy woman. No, Margaret. I'm a mother. And you should know better than anyone what a mother is capable of doing to protect her daughter. After all, I paused for dramatic effect. You set a very good example when you asked Samuel Cole for money to secure your children's future. The silence that followed was absolute. I could practically hear her blood pressure spiking through the phone. How? Her voice was barely a whisper now. I told you, I know a lot of things. Samuel was very meticulous with his records. And it turns out someone very close to him decided it was time for the truth to come to light. No one will believe you. No, I have documents. Bank transfers from Samuel's account directly to yours, dated right after John's death. Letters where you asked him for more money, threatening to tell his wife about the affair. Photographs of you two together. Should I continue? This is blackmail. This is consequence, Margaret. For 30 years, you've built an empire based on lies and deception. You raised 3 entitled children who think they can do whatever they want because they have money. And now one of those children nearly killed my daughter. So no, Margaret, this isn't blackmail. This is justice finally catching up with you. My lawyer is going to destroy you in court. Your lawyer can certainly try. But meanwhile, what do you think will happen when the Chronicle publishes the story of the respectable Margaret Sterling and her past as a secret mistress? How many of your bridge club friends will keep taking your calls? She hung up abruptly. Sarah looked at me with a mixture of awe and pride shining in her eyes. Mom, that was absolutely brutal. It needed to be. I finished for her. People like Margaret only understand one language, power. And now she knows I have all the power in this situation. That afternoon, Matthew called to inform us that Daniel's lawyers had requested an urgent meeting. They wanted to negotiate. Are we going? Sarah asked. Of course, but not to negotiate, to see exactly how desperate they are. The meeting was held in an upscale office downtown.